Welcome to the deep dive. Forget just following recipes today.
Hmm.
We are plunging into a particular philosophy of food and eating, guided by excerpts from Nigella Lawson's book, How to Eat.
Right.
Our mission is to really dig into this source material, pull out the surprising nuggets, the core ideas, and figure out what makes her perspective so, well, distinctive and pleasurable.
Yeah, it feels less like she's telling you what to cook and much more about how to think about cooking and eating, actually.
Exactly.
We're looking for that shortcut to understanding her whole approach, what drives it, and, why it clicks with so many people.
Precisely. We're going to explore this idea of cooking with instinct, what she highlights as truly essential in the kitchen, and maybe how to find some genuine joy in the simple act of feeding yourself. And others, of course.
Okay.
So let's really unpack this deep dive into the world according to How to Eat.
Right. Well, starting right from the preface, one of the first things that really strikes you is this fundamental idea. She explicitly says cooking isn't just about joining the dots.
Joining the dots.
Yeah.
Like, meaning it's not just connect recipe step A to step B to step C.
Exactly. It's not paint by numbers.
That feels like such a crucial distinction she's making. It's presented as something much richer. It's about developing a genuine understanding of food itself, gaining confidence.
Assurance, she calls it.
Assurance,
Mhm.
right. Gaining assurance in the kitchen over time through practice. And at its heart, being driven by that fundamental human desire just to make something to eat.
And that understanding, that assurance, that's where the instinct part comes in, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
She emphasizes how vital it is to trust your own palate, your own instincts. But what's interesting is she doesn't pretend this just appears out of nowhere.
No.
She says it takes confidence, and that confidence is built through trial and error, which she just plainly calls habit.
Habit, just doing it.
Yeah, you learn by doing, and probably sometimes by, well, messing up.
Absolutely. And I really like this point she makes that you must please yourself first. She writes that your real likes and desires in the kitchen, they should be your primary guide, because that's how you maintain your integrity, as she puts it, when cooking.
That makes sense. If you don't genuinely like what you're making, it's hard to cook it with any real pleasure or, convince others it's good.
Right. It totally shifts the focus. It becomes about cooking in context.
What does she mean by that exactly?
Well, thinking about the meal itself, the people you're cooking for, the mood, rather than just ticking off another recipe you've made or striving for some kind of uniform restaurant-style perfection.
Which might not even be what you want at home anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So moving from that kind of broader philosophy to the more practical stuff, the sources spend quite a bit of time on the foundations.
Right, the pantry, the fridge.
Having those core regular ingredients just ready to go, this seems incredibly important to her whole approach.
It's the scaffolding, isn't it? You need that structure to be spontaneous. She lists things she always keeps around. Garlic, onions, whole nutmeg.
And she emphasizes you need the grater for the nutmeg.
Yes. Can't forget the grater. Butter, eggs, milk, salad leaves, herbs, Parmesan. It's about having that base layer ready.
And then there are those wonderfully specific examples that just feel so real, like having the ingredients for spaghetti carbonara always on hand. But the one that truly lands for me, I think, is the wherewithal for a bacon sandwich.
Oh, yes. And the description is just classic Nigella, isn't it? That salty, sweet curl of seared flesh pressed between fat-softened, lean-stained, spongy supermarket white bread slices.
It's incredibly evocative. You can almost taste it. And it speaks to a very specific kind of comfort food she clearly values.
Definitely. On supermarket white bread, no less.
It captures it perfectly. And she's also refreshingly honest about the state of the average fridge, isn't she? Calling it often a culinary clutter.
Yeah, either overflowing or depressingly bare. It's very relatable.
It really is. So beyond the stocking up, the sources are packed with these practical tips and techniques, which you might call, I don't know, kitchen magic almost. Things that make cooking easier or better.
Little tricks. Simple but effective things. Like the tip to bring eggs to room temperature quickly. Just pop them in warm water for 10 minutes.
I use that one. Or using a wet towel under a mixing bowl to stop it sliding around while you whisk. Tiny things, but they improve the process.
Definitely. And then there are the more involved techniques, but described with such tactile language. Rubbing butter into flour for a crumble, for example.
Oh yeah, the description.
Described as your index and middle flutteringly stroking the fleshy pads of your thumbs. It makes you almost feel the process as you read it.
It does. Or handling pastry, carrying it draped over the rolling pin, or folding it carefully.
Mm-hmm.
The simple resonant sound of knocking the base of a loaf of bread to test if it's cooked through then sounds hollow.
Classic.
And that brilliant trick for peeling garlic, blanching the cloves first so you could just sort of exert pressure, pop out the clove, effortless.
Those are the details that really stick with you, the ones you actually use.
Absolutely. Now, another significant theme she explores is cooking ahead and strategic use of the freezer.
Right. But she immediately comes in with a strong warning, doesn't she? The freezer can easily become a culinary graveyard.
It really can. Food goes in with the best intentions.
Yeah, and is never seen again, or found months later unidentifiable.
Exactly. So her key advice is to freeze food with a particular occasion or a definite purpose in mind, not just vaguely for the future.
That focus makes it much more likely you'll actually remember it and use it. It makes sense.
And she identifies 2 areas where she says freezing is ruthlessly efficient.
Ah, yes, cooking for children.
And dieting.
Right. It helps create this sort of structured culinary database in the deep freeze for those specific needs, control and convenience.
She gives great examples of what works well frozen. Stews, like oxtail, though she notes it needs degreasing later when you reheat it.
Good tip. Or venison stew, which she points out makes a fabulous pasta sauce later on. Resourceful.
Baked pasta dishes are good candidates to assemble ahead and freeze. Even semi-cooking duck or a roast days in advance.
And she references an ancient Roman method from Apicius for that, which is just a fascinating little historical link to throw in there.
It really is. Roasted garlic or shallots freeze well, stewed peas, certain cakes like gingerbread and almond cake that actually benefit from sitting a day or two.
Improves the texture and flavor.
Yeah. And of course, freezing bread whole loaves or just sliced white bread for emergencies. It's all about maximizing efficiency for future meals without, sacrificing quality too much.
But what really gives this source material its flavor, I think, is how she talks about specific dishes and ingredients. Her voice, her personality, it just shines through every description.
Absolutely. Take the lettuce and lovage soup, for instance. It's probably an introduction to lovage for many readers.
I'd never heard of it before reading that.
Me neither. And it's described so vividly as being like grassy, slightly more aromatic celery. You immediately get a sense of that unique flavor profile.
Or the whole discussion about béarnaise sauce. She acknowledges there's a simply method alongside the classic one. But then she also gives you that unforgettable note about how too much tarragon can evoke a manure underfoot farmhouse scent.
It's so specific.
Yeah.
And quite opinionated. But then she softens it immediately with that encouragement to be kind to yourself if you can't find all the traditional ingredients like chervil.
Yeah, it's that mix of strong views and understanding reality. Her take on salads is interesting, too. The strong prejudice, she mentions, against putting tomatoes in leafy green salads.
I remember reading that.
The advice to add crunchy romaine lettuce to those often slightly sad mixed packets you buy.
Good advice. Gives them some backbone.
And generally leaving garlic out of green salads, preferring herbs instead. It's these distinct preferences that kind of guide you through her thinking.
And her appreciation for seasonality definitely comes through with those specific mentions. Rhubarb, Seville oranges, asparagus, gooseberries.
Grouse. Damson plums, quinces, white truffles. It's like a little calendar of delicious things reminding you to connect with what's good now.
The descriptions of the dishes themselves are just incredibly evocative. Frozen peas aren't just peas. They became green meat.
Green meat. It's brilliant. A simple stew isn't just dinner. It has a sort of alchemy.
The preference for oxtail cooked on the bone because it yields that artery-thickening, deep and unctuous sauce. She doesn't shy away from richness.
No. And she avoids what she calls landscape cookery, food that looks pretty, perhaps, but lacks substance or real comfort.
That resonates. Liver, she says, is only confidently served to specific, known, liver-loving people. Smart move.
Very diplomatic. Steak is presented as comforting food specifically for two.
Interesting specificity.
And you feel the relief in the descriptions of things like dreamy and mild noodle soup or a sweet salving banana as recovery food after dieting. It's about the emotional connection, too.
That image of the sauce for crab linguine elegantly and sparsely covering the pasta, not drowning it.
Precision. Or using leftover roasted potatoes as croutons because, as she says, anything that's in the oven gives me less grief. Practical and funny at the same time.
It is. The spectacular but delicate beauty of a Sauternes and lemon balm jelly. And that simple truth about cheese. preferring bread over the intrusive and unyielding surface of a cracker.
So true. Bread is just better with cheese, isn't it?
Generally, yes. And the way she throws in those quirky flavor combinations or methods, cabbage with caraway seeds.
Saffron couscous with cherries and chickpeas. Steak with anchovies and olives, which she admits doesn't look as dinky-doo as it sounds.
Huh, love that. Rubbing ginger on a roast chicken before cooking it.
The description of rhubarb ice cream, or custard, as an accidental creation. That affectionate term gunge for her chocolate raspberry cake.
You know exactly what she means by gunge there, don't you? That lovely, messy richness.
Totally. Red currants macerated in sugar and orange juice until they become sticky, shiny scarlet jewels.
Beautiful imagery.
And that unforgettable reference to fascist beans when talking about a bitter leaf salad with anchovy dressing, it's just pure her voice, isn't it? Strong, sometimes irreverent, completely distinctive.
Definitely her voice. So, moving beyond the plates themselves, the source offers this really compelling perspective on entertaining and just integrating eating into life more generally.
Yeah, there's a very deliberate move away from the formality and the pressure of, capital E entertaining.
Or dinner parties, where you feel you have to slave, to strive, to sweat, to perform. She wants to dismantle that feeling.
It's about reframing it as simply having dinner or maybe kitchen suppers. The focus shifts right back to making food you genuinely want to eat and then sharing that enjoyment.
Rather than creating fancy arranged foods just to impress people.
Exactly. And there's such liberation in her point that you absolutely do not have to make dessert from scratch.
Oh, that's a big one.
It's completely fine. She encourages it even to just buy good quality ice cream or nice cookies or beautiful creations from a local patissier. It takes so much pressure off the host.
It really does. Planning is acknowledged as necessary sometimes, like for a big Sunday lunch, which might need to be planned as efficiently as a military campaign.
Which sounds slightly intimidating.
A little, but it's balanced with that core philosophy of finding joy in it, discovery, and being adaptable if things don't go exactly to plan.
Right. Now, the section on low-fat cooking is particularly striking, mostly because of its very specific framing.
Yeah, how she introduces it.
She states right up front this isn't driven by health concerns. She specifically says it's not about toxins or chakras or blood sugar or cholesterol.
So what is it about, according to her?
Purely vanity is the word she uses, specifically whether your genes will zip.
Wow, that's
Okay.
bracingly honest.
It is refreshing, and it leads directly to her rejection of what she sees as fake diet food, famously describing reduced fat cheese as bitter rubber.
Bit of rubber. Ouch.
Her preference is clearly stated: have a smaller amount of the real thing, because real strong cheddar in a smaller quantity will have more taste anyway.
That makes intuitive sense. Quality over quantity.
And portioning and freezing food, like pre-grating cheese and freezing it in small portions, is suggested as a practical strategy. For calorie control, yes, but also just establishing routine.
And the advice to gravitate towards naturally low-fat cuisines like Thai, Japanese, or other Asian foods, that seems logical.
Yeah, the logic is that these foods taste right, are right in their original form. You're not eating strangulated versions of dishes that are fundamentally designed around higher fat content, like, say, a low-fat carbonara.
Which rarely works well.
Exactly. There's a personal vulnerability in this section, too, isn't there? Mentioning how her own eating habits were influenced by her mother, and the difficulty of dieting because of emotional eating, that tendency she admits to turn to food when I'm unhappy or under stress.
That's very relatable for many people, I imagine, and that perfectly articulated observation about not wanting people to notice weight changes either way.
Oh, yes. She says, every time someone says you've lost weight, I hear you were fat.
It gets right to the heart of that social anxiety around weight and appearance, doesn't it?
It really does. Finally, the sources also devote a section to feeding babies and small children.
Right, highlighting it as another area where that strategic cooking and freezing becomes incredibly useful.
It includes the idea, which feels quite modern now, but maybe less so then, that babies are actually quite capable of regulating their own intake if you just let them. Trust the baby.
And she shares that specific, quite striking experience,
Yeah.
saying baby rice just didn't work for her children.
Yeah, the reasoning she gives is fascinating. She felt it swelled up later in their stomachs, leading to vomiting, which she interpreted as interfering with their own fine calibration of how much food they actually needed.
Interesting theory. The timing for introducing salt is also noted, waiting until children were older before adding it to their food.
Sensible. And the practical importance, again, of having a cache of food you can throw together easily. Staples like canned tuna, pasta or noodles, mashed potatoes are mentioned as absolute lifesavers for parents.
Definitely. There's a lovely little detail about baking potatoes, specifically to make mashed potato for young children.
And suggesting you eat the skin yourself. Waste not, want not.
Exactly. And for younger ones, you might mix other ingredients like ham, meat, chicken, or vegetables right into the mash.
But then observing that older children often prefer everything separate on the plate, it's that close observation of the nuances of feeding a family over time.
Specific dishes she found successful are mentioned too, like a duck liver sauce, made milder with muscat or apple juice instead of stronger alcohol.
And cottage or shepherd's pie, noting a preference for freshly ground meat and sometimes freezing the fillings separately from the topping.
And even serving the meat filling with rice or pasta sometimes, instead of the traditional potato topping. Flexible.
Yeah. Ultimately, though, the philosophy for feeding children seems to echo the broader philosophy. It comes back to joy and natural engagement.
Allowing children to see you cook and eat with pleasure, she suggests, creates a foundation for their own habits.
Letting it happen naturally, without too much veneration or pressure, focused specifically on the food itself. Just part of life.
So, stepping back from this deep dive into the sources from how to eat, what really comes through is this really appealing blend, isn't it? Philosophy, practical advice, and very strong, sometimes quite opinionated, personal preference.
Yeah, it strips away a lot of the pretense and the performance anxiety that can sometimes creep into cooking, and especially entertaining. It makes it all feel much more approachable, deeply human, and, well, genuinely pleasurable.
Absolutely. The value isn't just in the specific recipes themselves, although many are classics, but in this kind of permission structure she gives you. Permission to find your own way in the kitchen.
Guided by your own tastes, your own instincts.
It encourages you to cook for your actual life, maybe, rather than just for show.
That sums it up well. It's been a really fascinating look at this particular perspective on food. There's definitely a lot to chew on here, so to speak.
Indeed. It offers such a rich tapestry of ideas, way beyond just how to combine ingredients A and B. So, as you think about everything we've discussed today, drawing from these sources, maybe consider this. In your own kitchen, how much are you currently following external instructions versus listening to your own internal instinct, your own desires?
Good question.
And perhaps, what's one small change you could make this week to bring just a little more pleasure and maybe a little less performance into your own cooking?